I'm Ashwin Segkar, and you're listening to Help Me I'm a Comedian, where we ask a comedian to come in and share some pain from their life, an issue that you might also be able to relate to, and we work through it with a therapist. My guests today are comedian Jordan Kadell and psychologist Dr Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists. Hello to you both.
Hi Ashwin. Hi Ashwin.
Jordan, can I start with your story?
My story started almost 6 years ago when my little brother went to schoolies. My parents really didn't want him to go. They didn't want any of us to go. Our family was very anti-schoolies culture. And I never really wanted to go. I went to Hong Kong with my best friend instead, and that was a great time. So as a bargain, my parents signed him up to a program where they take a bunch of kids. In his case, I think it was about 300 kids, and mostly from the New South Wales area. And they take them to an island. This island was in Fiji. And they supervise them so they can have a really fun time and they can let loose, but it's all safe. And unfortunately, it didn't go that way. And it was the second night of the schoolie celebration that my brother got really, really drunk, and he fell asleep in the swimming pool, and he died. And that's where it starts.
What happened after that? Did you end up going over to see what happened next?
We did as soon as we could. It happened at 4 a.m. I found out at 8 a.m, and then I think we were on a plane around lunchtime. It's hard to remember things that happened around that time. I just remember, going to the airport and getting a really nice welcome in Fiji, and it was really sunny and tropical, and we could not appreciate any of it. We couldn't see him for a few days though. There was some poor communication in the hospital, in the morgue, I should say. We weren't allowed to see him until the pathologist had seen him, and the pathologist was somewhere else. And so I think it took 2 days to see him. And in that time, we kind of set up, I guess, an interview session. We saw the site where he passed, and the staff set us up in a room, and kind of one by one, maybe 10 different kids came in and told us what had happened. And of course, he'd gone over with a few of his best friends. So we saw them immediately and spent some time with them. But it was a really, really strange process that it felt like it took so long to see him that I kind of didn't even believe he was there after a while.
It would have been very surreal.
It was very odd.
Yes.
Yeah. And we had a chaperone for the whole process, someone from the embassy, who's a lovely woman. I still have a business card in my wallet. It was strange. It was it's a holiday destination, and everyone we met was on a holiday.
It'd be like your brain could not compute what had happened.
No.
Just disbelief. Couldn't believe it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my parents were really good. They were amazing. They just did what had to be done. But it's like you said, it was so surreal. It was we had to do normal things in the meantime. We had to go get dinner because you just had to do something.
Yeah.
So we went to the hotel restaurant, and my dad walked in and said to the waitress, "Hi, could we get a table for 4? My son just died and we're here to collect him. Do you have a table for 4? And I remember standing there and not even trying to help, because I was just well, that's true. Do you have a table?
Yeah.
Yep, we're going to need one.
Was this your first experience of someone close to you passing away?
Fortunately, no. The biggest experience, I guess, biggest maybe not the right adjective, my best friend passed away when we were 10. So I lost her in primary school, and I had a great-grandfather and a grandfather pass. So I was pretty seasoned by this time.
Grief wasn't entirely new to you.
No. Yeah. And in fact, my mum had a brother that passed away when he was 17, and I always grew up with that just being a part of the conversation. At every birthday or Christmas, it was very much and remember when Stephen did this, or this Christmas with Stephen. And I didn't really think about it until my brother passed, but I kind of grew up feeling like I had another uncle that I just never met.
That you never met.
But I heard about him just as much as any other family member that was maybe a distant cousin or something that we don't see often, but you still talk about them and what's happening with them.
That's one way of keeping them alive in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, I really think that's what my family have been doing. So we try to do that as well.
Can I ask you a question, Jordan, about when you did get to see your brother?
Yes.
I want to ask you that out of real curiosity, and so you can teach me something, because I've had clients in my work who have seen a parent or a sibling or a friend or a partner who's passed away and been left with the question of, was it the right thing to do to actually see their deceased body or not, or have come and asked for advice about whether that's a good thing to do. And I'm just curious about your experience of
No, I'm really
seeing
glad
him.
that I saw him.
You're really glad that you
I
did.
wish I'd stayed longer. I think it made it real, and it's not saying goodbye. I know people say that. You got to go see them to say goodbye. Like, they're already gone.
Yes.
And there's like a shock in that as well. Like, I think sometimes in my life it's easy to deal with when I'm in spaces that he never existed. Like, if I'm moving to a new house or I've got a new job or I have new friends that just don't know about that, it can be really manageable.
Yes.
And so it was sort of bizarre going into a space that he never would have been, and he was just there. If you know what I mean? He was just,
Yes.
And he'd been embalmed and everything, and it's the strangest feeling to like reach down to touch someone, and like even their body is just not their body.
Not that body.
Yeah.
No response.
It's so hard
Yeah.
and cold. And I think that's kind of what grounded it for me. That I was like, he's not there now.
I was wondering whether that changed your state from disbelief and surrealness to this is how it is.
Yeah. Like, for me, it's important. I understand some people couldn't cope with it, but I'm the kind of person that I need that. I need the proof. I need all of it. If something terrible is going to happen, don't leave anything out. Anytime that I maybe do think that it wasn't real, that's the image that comes back. It's kind of like, I don't know, like a totem or something.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a grave. We cremated him and spread his ashes on his favourite snowboard run. I guess in some ways, like, maybe some people might visit a grave to confirm the loss or visit them.
Yes.
But for me, I have an image in my head that I hold on to.
I think what can happen when something's very shocking and traumatic is it freezes a sense of time. Did you have that at all, where you felt like it was still that day or still that year, even as time passed?
Yeah. I feel like maybe 2 years for me was just that. Like, I didn't stop going to work. I just kept working, going to work every day, which was a good choice and a bad choice, because I'd just fall asleep.
What's your job?
Like then I was at a cafe.
So you have to be nice to people. And
absolutely.
Chirpy.
Smile.
Yeah. But also, if you start crying, they're really nice to you back.
That's true.
It's a really low stakes job.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't really mess anything up too bad, but I did often like just sleep in an extra 5 or 6 hours because I was just constantly exhausted. I was just emotionally exhausted all the time. I think once I slept for like a day and a half, and my manager came to my house because I hadn't picked up the phone, and I had no idea. I felt like I'd just gone to bed at 10 and was supposed to wake up at 6 and just didn't. And I went through a lot of those sorts of behavioural patterns for a long time.
I was wondering about your experience of grief over that 2 years following his death. You know, whether you felt stuck in time in a sense, whether you were very tired and you just said you were exhausted
all the time. Drank a lot, which was not helpful. And I had a lot of friends around that time that were really big drinkers and in the art scene. So, you know, if you weren't drinking for pain, you're drinking for pleasure or big social or networking.
But it helped you cope in a way at the time.
It totally did. And those people helped me cope. And I'm very grateful for them. But those were just some very unhealthy patterns.
Coping
Obviously,
mechanisms.
they take coping mechanisms. They take a toll, and they mean that when you want to stop using those types of coping mechanisms, you get a bit lost again, trying to find something else that can work, something that takes its place.
Was comedy something that took its place?
I think so. It was maybe almost 3 years after, and I had an Airbnb guest who persuaded me to try it because I'd been an actor. I'd trained as an actor, was working as an actor, but I just couldn't really perform anymore. It was just too hard. And it didn't help that I was often getting roles of someone who had lost their husband or had killed their children and just always typecast as that crazy person. So I'd stopped performing for a while, and this guest he was really fun. He worked as a developer and just travelled the world working remotely, did whatever he wanted. He was studying clowning a few streets away from my house, which is why he was staying there. And he was like, all right, what are you doing with your life? What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go to Japan. And he's like, let's go together. And I was like, that sounds rapey. Let's not do that. And he's like, what else do you want to do? And I said, comedy. And he said, all right, let's do it. And the Raw comedy competition was coming up, and that was, for me, a really easy way to just start. I did try and write some jokes about him.
Yeah.
About my brother. And, surprisingly, they didn't work. But my friends and family were very gracious.
Yeah.
In that time. And yeah, I think I will again. I think it just takes a really long time.
Yeah, people seem to come to the real issues 7 to 10 years into their career.
Absolutely,
I find for the first few years, because I've seen your sets, it's very funny. And the last thing I saw you do was a dance move and meeting some guy in a club while dancing. It was very mimey. But yeah, I was just wondering, I'm the same. I can't make serious issues funny just yet. It's hard. But did you say you tried to initially because you wanted to use it for that reason?
Really lame stuff. And you got to realise that, I mean, as an audience member, hearing someone talk about a dead sibling on stage, immediately you shut down. Immediately you're closed off. It's too much. If you talk about maybe a dead grandparent, that's fine because they had a life and they're old and grandparents
It doesn't
die.
hurt so much.
It doesn't hurt so much, and we can kind of all relate to that.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit less common to have a sibling or even a parent, someone really close to you. So, immediately I say my dead brother like it's really funny. Because to me, it's sort of absurd, and it is funny in itself that I'm trying to do jokes about that. And I've already alienated the audience. And then I think the kind of jokes I used to do were about Facebook. Because, when you're on Facebook and you've got your suggested friends in the feed, my brother and I are still friends. I didn't unfriend him. But Facebook is constantly suggesting that I invite him to events. Every event.
Yeah.
He is the top suggestion that I invite. And he just doesn't turn up to anything. So I don't understand why the algorithm hasn't picked up on that. Yeah, so that's where we are now, and I'd like to be somewhere else in the future. And I think I'm getting close, but yeah, I'm happy to sit on it.
Yeah.
Sit on it for a little longer.
Do you even talk to him sometimes, like people
I do
talk?
sometimes. Yeah, he's in the front seat of my car. That's where he is.
Okay. So every time you drive,
Yeah,
he's with
whenever
you.
I'm driving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, and driving became really hard for a while because I'd almost get distracted by him, and I'd be like a really terrible driver because I was just too busy chatting, too busy rousing on him, and then I would get home and I'd park, and then I couldn't get out of the car for sometimes a few hours.
Would stay there with him.
Exactly.
It's part of your grieving process. It's kind of beautiful in a bittersweet
It is a bit, yeah.
way, Grieving is a really sacred thing. I mean, we can sit here and talk about it, but it's so personal.
It is.
Spiritual.
It really is. And that was something that I learned. I had some idea that my family all going through this thing together, that we would feel the same way about it. We didn't feel the same way about it at all. My mum loves to keep him as her phone background and have lots of photos and things that he's made around at all times. And I find that just a little bit too confronting.
Right.
I often pull something out or, maybe look at some photos, but I cannot watch a video. The video is, I'm done. And that was actually the thing that my last therapist suggested that I do, that I start trying to do that, but it's too much for me. It's too real. That was a suggestion to do the thing that I find hardest, which is to watch a video. I don't want to. I've taken all of her advice except for that.
Yeah.
I feel it's too cruel to put myself through. I don't want to do that.
What have you learned about grief, Jordan, that you would share with somebody else who's maybe just at the, in the early days? Is there anything you've learned about grief?
That's so tough because, like you said, it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who unfortunately lost his sister a few months ago. And I didn't know what to do. You'd think that I would know what to do, but I didn't know. I left him a note. I gave some advice to some of the people around him that were unsure, but I would just always let them know that you were there for them in any way that is. And sometimes I think you also have to just choose how you're going to be there for them, or force yourself in a way, not in an intrusive way, but, you know, make them food or take their cues.
Yeah.
I had so many people when my brother passed that were trying to decide for me what I needed. And that was painful in itself and kind of offensive. Mm-hmm. But I get it. It's they were trying to do for me what either they would want for themselves or what they just felt was right. Just be there for them. Let them talk when they're ready. It's a thing. I'm all for talking about it. I never want to be that person that's like, we can't talk about it. We'll never talk about him. But at the same time, if someone doesn't want to talk about it, I think you should really respect that, because you never know how triggering that's going to be. Rejecting feelings or, you know, trying to pretend that I'm not grieving or, no, I'm done with that, try to get out of grief, that really doesn't help. If you kind of accept it and you go into the grief,
yeah,
I think that's the best way, because you will come out eventually, or you'll come out changed, but it gets manageable. My anxiety got really bad.
Yeah,
after he
tell
died.
me about that.
Yeah, I guess I just associate it with my survival instinct. Like it's just that thing that, are you in danger? Do you feel good? Are you alive? I always grew up thinking that only some people had that, and what I was feeling probably wasn't bad enough to even look into. You know, it was very manageable. But yeah, I would say that after he died, it got quite bad at times. Like things like sitting in the car for hours, I would just associate with anxiety, because I was so anxious to be away from that space.
Anxious to be away from your car. Is that
Away
what you mean?
from my car.
Yeah.
And I think it's also because I found out when I was in the car. Yeah, I was driving to work.
What you went through, as I see it, is a kind of, you know, that when you got the phone call and then your experience in Fiji, that whole time after he died is a kind of trauma. And it's a kind of trauma because it's got the elements of trauma in there. There's the shock, the massive shock. This is the last thing you expected. And then there's the feeling of intense stress and distress, coupled with a sense of powerlessness, a sense of there's nothing we can do. You know, often in life when we're very, very stressed, we can do something, but there's nothing you can do to bring him back.
No.
And that in itself, physiologically, biologically, it traps a lot of emotion in our system, because there's nothing we can, you know, if you're being chased by a dog, you can jump the fence and get away from the dog. And although it's very stressful and you're very frightened and anxious, you can do something and use up that energy. But in a situation that involves shock or trauma, you can't do anything with that energy. You know, you do what you do, you go through the motions, you organise what needs to be organised, but there's a whole lot of emotional distress that hasn't got anywhere to go. And it sort of sensitises us, you know, and so we become very vulnerable and susceptible to being triggered. I think this is where we get sort of a little bit of the post-traumatic stress reactions. Yeah, just under the surface, ready to be, you know, and it's biological, it's physiological, often out of the blue, I'm sure, is your experience. Yes. When you least expect it, it comes out in bits and pieces.
I'm a master at crying in public and not having anyone see me. I'm very good. Yeah. Often at work still.
Really?
Yeah. Often, because I have a few jobs, but one of them is in an office and everyone is staring at a computer screen, and you can very easily cry and no one sees you. Or in the cafe. Often, it's happening in the last few months, I see people that look like him, or I see guys that would be about his age right now, and then that kind of triggers me, and I'm just like very swiftly pick up a plate, cry behind it kind of thing, come back out, keep going, because you have to. And it's also kind of nice to see him.
Comedian Jordan Kadell and psychologist Rachel Hannam from North Brisbane Psychologists. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Ashwin.
Thanks for having me.